This is a story my brother swore was true. He was a soldier in the middle of a war, but what he faced out there wasn't just enemy fire. Something was watching him from the darkness, something no training could prepare him for. What he saw, he still can't explain. I have spent a lot of time looking into unusual things people have experienced while serving in the military. I have talked with veterans, searched through stories, and listened to accounts that are hard to forget. Some talk about creatures like Bigfoot, others about strange lights in the sky, and a few mention things far scarier than either. One story still sticks with me. We used to call it the Vietnam Predator. I am not saying the folks who made the movie Predator ever heard my story, but it feels like they knew about things like it. When I saw that movie years later, I remember thinking, yeah, they got it right. Back in Vietnam, I was flying with the 281st Assault Helicopter Company. Our job was to carry Special Forces troops, drop them into rough areas, help with raids, reconnaissance, and anything else they needed. It was dangerous work. At that time, the United States military had just started using helicopters to hit enemy forces from behind, where they least expected us. It was fast, risky, and sometimes deadly, especially when the intelligence was wrong. And believe me, intelligence was often wrong. More than once, you could land right in between two enemy units without even knowing it. In 1967, my helicopter went down. It was not enemy fire that did it. It was a mechanical failure. The transmission gave out. Back then, the UH-1 Huey was still pretty new, and it had a lot of weak points. These days, helicopters are built with more backup systems, but at that time, one failure could take you out of the sky. The maintenance crew always kept our aircraft in good shape, so maybe it was just bad luck. When we crashed, the tree canopy broke some of the fall, but we still hit hard. The helicopter rolled over after dropping about 20 feet, and that crushed 3 of my buddies right there on the spot. There was nothing anyone could do for them. That left me, my co-pilot, and 5 other guys from the back of the chopper. Somehow our PRC-10 radio still worked, but only halfway. We could hear transmissions, but we could not send any out. Something must have knocked it around in the crash. On our map, the nearest firebase was about 20 kilometers away. That might not sound too far until you try moving through that thick, wet jungle. The place was a wall of trees and vines that slowed you down to just a couple of kilometers a day. We argued about staying put and waiting for rescue, but we knew we had gone down near a major Viet Cong area. If our own guys had heard our mayday, the enemy probably had too. So we took what we could carry, destroyed the equipment we didn't want falling into enemy hands, and started walking. That first night we didn't see anything unusual, but we heard something. At first I thought it was just some strange jungle bird. It made this sharp, quick clicking sound, like tapping 2 pieces of metal together over and over. But one of the Special Forces guys stopped me cold and said, "That's no bird." These guys were trained to know every sound out there. They could tell you what kind of animal made a noise just by how it echoed through the trees. If he said it wasn't a bird, I believed him. We figured maybe it was the Viet Cong tracking us, so we picked up the pace. But the sound, it didn't fade. It followed us. And then, this part still gives me chills. It passed us. Whatever it was, it moved ahead of us through the trees, 30 or maybe 40 meters off, but high up, like it was traveling through the treetops. We froze and ducked for cover, waiting for an ambush. But it never came, and that made no sense at all. If the Viet Cong were really out there, they would have hit us right then. Capturing American soldiers was high priority for them. Yet nothing happened. We stuck to moving late in the day and through the night, trying to avoid the worst of the heat. Progress was slow. The rain had turned the ground to mush, every step sinking in like we were walking through wet clay. We were barely making 3, maybe 4 kilometers in a whole day. And still, every time we started moving, that clicking came back. It was like it was waiting, listening, and when we moved, it moved too, almost like it was saying, "I'm still here." But when we rested or slept, it went silent. The second night, we saw it. Or at least I think we did. I was up near the front when something big crossed ahead of us. I couldn't make out any details, it was too dark under the canopy, but the way it blocked what little light came through the trees, you could feel something massive moving out there. I don't know if this makes sense, but it was like the darkness itself shifted as it moved. You couldn't see it exactly, but you knew it was there because of the way branches and leaves swayed aside. By the time I snapped my rifle up, it was gone. At first I thought maybe it was an animal, but deep down I knew better. We all knew better. Something about it felt wrong, like it wasn't natural. The next day confirmed it. We had stopped in a tight group of trees for cover from the sun. Good concealment, good shade. Everything seemed quiet until we heard it again. It was out there moving through the brush. We grabbed our weapons and crawled to the edge of the tree line, ready for a fight if it came to it. Right in front of us was a clearing filled with tall grass, our trail still visible where we had trampled through. Only that wasn't our real trail. 2 of the guys had doubled back earlier and built a fake trail, looping it into the jungle to throw off anyone tracking us. From the other side of that field, something was pushing through the brush. We couldn't see it clearly, but we saw the way the vegetation bent and swayed. And then as it crossed into the tall grass, we could see the grass flattening in a line, like something heavy was walking straight across, following that fake trail we had made. It reached that fake trail we had made and stopped. For a moment, everything went silent except for the jungle itself breathing around us. Then, slowly, it started following the trail. And that's when we saw it. You ever see that movie Predator? The way that thing blends into the jungle, almost invisible except for a faint shimmer in the air? That's what it looked like. You could see through it, but everything behind it bent and rippled, like heat rising from asphalt. It was huge, too. You could tell by the size of the distortion and the way the tall grass crushed flat as it walked. It followed that fake trail back into the trees, and soon we only heard faint movement in the distance, and then nothing. That was the last time we ever heard it. I don't know if it lost our real trail or if it just got bored and walked away. All I know is I've never been so scared and so relieved at the same time. People might expect some dramatic ending, but for us, just being alive was dramatic enough. When we finally made it back to base, we all made a pact. None of us would ever tell anyone what we saw out there. Who would believe us? Nobody wants to be called crazy or get sent to a psychiatrist. As for what it was, I honestly can't say. I couldn't make out any real shape beyond the distortion. I don't know if it was alien or some kind of strange experimental thing. I just know what I saw, and I know I'm not the only one. Other people have seen things like that too. The Dream. It was the mid-2000s, and I was on night security duty at an Air Force installation. Midnight shift, long, boring hours in a Humvee. Technically, you are not supposed to sleep on duty. If you get caught, you are in serious trouble. But everyone did what we called one up, one down. One person stays alert while the other takes a short nap. Then you switch. That night, it was my turn to rest. And I had a dream. In the dream, I woke up from my nap, looked over, and saw my partner completely out cold. I got angry and reached over to shake him awake, but he did not move, no matter how hard I shook him. That is when I noticed something outside. There, in front of the Humvee, a figure was standing just beyond the edge of the light. Then, out of nowhere, more of them stepped out of the darkness, one after another, until we were surrounded. Shoulder to shoulder, a full circle of people? Except they did not look like people. Not really. Their faces were wrong. No noses, tiny little mouths, sharp-pointed chins, and pale skin that almost glowed under the dim lights. Their eyes. God, their eyes were huge, stretching almost to the sides of their heads. I freaked out, reached for my weapon, and I could not move it. It wasn't locked, it wasn't stuck on anything, but it was like it weighed 1,000 pounds. No matter how hard I pulled, I could not lift it. And then I woke up. For real, this time. I looked over and saw my partner still asleep, just like in the dream. My heart was hammering as I shook him awake, and he snapped to, apologizing, saying he had no idea he had even fallen asleep. I shrugged it off, chalked it up to a weird nightmare, until a few weeks later when something happened in the break room. There was another patrol sitting in the break room that day. One of their guys was talking quietly, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. My ears perked up when he said the words, "strange dream," out on patrol. I froze when he started describing my dream, the exact same one. Every detail matched. The Humvee, the circle of those pale, wrong-looking people, the huge eyes, everything. At first I thought they were messing with me, but there was no way they could know, because I had never told anyone, not even my partner from that night. That rattled me enough that I started asking around. Turns out 3 other guys had the same dream over the last 2 months. And every single one of us, we had all been on the same exact patrol route when it happened. I still don't know what it means, but to this day, I can picture those faces clear as day, and it chills me to the bone. Afghanistan Beast. Part of our mission in Afghanistan was to provide security for State Department people and intelligence guys when they traveled way up into the mountains to meet tribal chiefs. The roads were barely there, the terrain was harsh, and the job was risky, but those meetings were important. These chiefs could make life easier or a whole lot harder for our forces. Early on, the deal was simple. We gave them money and support, and in return, they either helped us or, at the very least, agreed not to attack NATO interests. These people lived simple lives. Most of them had no electricity, except for the occasional old generator, and almost none of them had ever seen a television or a movie. That part is important for what I'm about to tell you. We knew what we experienced was real because I later talked to other guys who had been up in those mountains, and they had stories too. This particular trip was routine. We were meeting a chief who had been friendly to us. Probably helped that we had funneled around $20,000 to him since the start of the war. That kind of money was a fortune there. It was one of those goodwill stops. Shake hands, treat a few sick villagers, hand out some supplies, and remind them we were friends. They controlled a mountain pass that was key to stopping Taliban fighters from slipping through. We had just finished dinner when a young boy came running in. His face was pale as chalk, and he was panicked, yelling a word over and over, waving towards the edge of the village. Immediately, a group of men grabbed their rifles and bolted outside. Our translator, the Terp, tried to keep up, but he said he had never even heard that word before. That made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. We went after them. Even though carrying full gear inside the village was considered bad manners, we always kept our rifles within arm's reach because, safe or not, you never really know. We reached the edge of the village where they kept the livestock in corrals at night. That is when we saw the chaos. One boy was unconscious, laid out on the ground next to an old Kalashnikov. He had been the only one armed, and the rest of the boys gone. There was a small mixed herd of sheep and goats, along with some donkeys and a few mules. The animals were all going crazy. We could see a blood smear on the ground that the animals had all avoided, and damage to the wooden fence from where it looked like something big had knocked into it. They kept repeating that word, and the men rushed out into the dark. We followed, still not sure what was going on. I had a thermal sight that I used to scan ahead of us, and I spotted a large heat source close to the ground. I thought it must have been a very big rock that was still radiating heat from the sun, until suddenly the thing stood up. And I do mean stood, as in it was on two legs. The thing let out a horrible scream, like nothing I'd ever heard. It was like a mix of the Jurassic Park T-Rex and the shriek of a jet engine, starting off really bassy and ending up in a high pitch. We must have been at least 70 meters away when it roared, and I swear I could still feel it in my chest. The men seemed nonplussed, though, and they just started firing at it. But I could see through my thermal as it just bounded away at incredible speed, out of sight and over a ridge in seconds. Nobody chased the creature further, probably because it was a waste of time. That thing was too fast. It turns out, whatever it was, had snuck up to the animal pens, knocked out the oldest boy, the one with the gun. I don't know how it got so close. The villagers admitted that they had been preoccupied and talking amongst themselves, probably excited over our arrival, a bunch of white and black strangers. Plus, the other villagers later told us through our interpreter that these things were sneaky. It's like impossibly sneaky. So it took two of the sheep, full-grown animals, and just stepped over the small fence. I know it did that because I saw the footprints. Massive tracks, easily over 14 inches long, and they were clear in the dirt of the pens and around them. Through our interpreter, the villagers told us that these giants, I don't remember the exact name they had for them, but it translated to something like devil giant, if I remember right. Anyway, these giants would snatch livestock at night, moving up really stealthily and then just taking off at incredible speeds with a screaming animal. Nobody was allowed to travel far from the village on their own either. Sometimes these things would be in the canyons and the ridges around the village, throwing rocks at people or scaring them with screams like the one we heard. The thing is, everyone treated this thing, basically an Afghanistan Bigfoot from their description, like it was a totally normal thing that happened. The villagers weren't too surprised, even though one of them had knocked out the oldest kid, the one with the gun. And that's kind of terrifying, because it means that this thing was smart enough to know what a gun was and identify who had it. I guess this is just an animal or a thing that they've been living with for generations, and for our fancy tech that we brought to hunt terrorists and bad guys down, we had no clue they even existed. I'm going to be honest with you, after seeing how massive the thing was and how fast it moved, with all our firepower, I don't know that we could have survived a group of them swarming down on us from the ridges. It made the trip home even more nerve-wracking than normal, as we went down the valleys to what passed for civilization, and I never liked going back up into the mountains after that. The Shadow People. My first deployment was to Iraq, and to run convoys, no less. I knew running convoys was dangerous, especially when something broke down right in the middle of nowhere, and I mean really the middle of nowhere. No locals, no towns, just desert as far as you could see. We couldn't just leave the vehicle or the gear, so we called for a tow. They said it'd be a few hours before a tow truck could get to us, then more time to get security to escort it, which meant we were stuck overnight. I won't lie, I was scared. Out there in hostile territory, stuck, no backup nearby, I was sure we'd get ambushed before morning. We set up 360 security with the vehicles in the middle, like some old wagon train crossing the west. Everyone took turns watching the perimeter. Early on, one of the guys said he was seeing figures out in the desert. Nobody was asleep, so we went to check. At first it was just shadows, vague shapes moving back and forth. We thought maybe Bedouin nomads or something, but they never got close. What freaked us out was when one guy aimed his weapon's infrared laser at one of the figures, and it just vanished. No joke. The laser didn't glow visibly,
But with night vision, you could see the beam hit the shadow and the shadow just disappeared. Those things were out there all night, walking back and forth, always just far enough away that we didn't feel directly threatened, but close enough to make the hairs on your neck stand up. I don't think a single one of us slept that night. And when dawn finally came, I swear I never felt relief like that before. Benning Bigfoot. I'm not even sure what they call Fort Benning now. I know they renamed it. But when I was there, if you worked the ranges, you knew Bigfoot was real. Nobody doubted it. Every new guy got warned about it. They'd laugh, think it was some dumb joke, but eventually everyone saw one for themselves. And no, we weren't messing around. Even the ranger instructors knew. More than one group of ranger trainees ran into something out there in the woods. But outside those groups, nobody talked about it. It was a big joke to everyone else, and honestly, that kind of pissed me off. These things, call them Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever, you mostly saw them around wintertime, when the ranges weren't as busy. I never really figured out why they preferred that area with all the firing. You'd think the noise would scare them off, but I think they knew the guns only went off on the ranges and there was no hunting, camping, or hiking anywhere near those spots. People would get shot if they tried. That no hunting rule probably worked in the Bigfoot's favor too. It meant their food source, mostly deer, was left alone. I know for a fact they hunt deer because we actually saw one in action. The ranges were big stretches of empty land, and the deer moved through there whenever the firing stopped for a few days. That open space was perfect for these creatures. They could run fast without tripping on brush or getting tangled up. The first time I saw one was during some maintenance on a range tower, just swapping out some rotten boards, nothing major. Suddenly, it sounded like a freight train barreling through the trees downrange. Then this massive beast comes tearing out, easily over 10 feet tall, maybe 700 or 800 pounds. It was running so hard you could feel every step from where we were, charging straight at a group of spooked deer. Deer are fast, but this thing was faster. It caught one in about 10 steps, and they both tumbled down. The Bigfoot smashed into the trees on the other side, ripping up the vegetation. I never saw it again after that. It probably bolted, knowing full well we were there from the noise. The deer didn't care. We were used to them, and it seemed like the Bigfoots were too. Footprints showed up from time to time, and some shooters who stumbled on them got scared or claimed we were pranking them. We didn't bother trying to convince anyone. We knew they were there and liked it that way. The last thing anyone wanted was some dumb grunt off-duty, wandering the woods, maybe getting shot during night fire drills. Don't underestimate grunt stupidity. Sometimes when the range was active, I'd spot one or two. You learn where to look. These things are masters of hiding, picking just the right spot so their dark fur blends perfectly with the shadows. But they're curious, and their faces don't have much hair. If you had binoculars and knew where to look, you might catch a glimpse. Usually, they'd hang off to one side of the range just sitting there, watching us fire rounds. I think maybe they liked it, like little kids like watching gunfire. Honestly, maybe we're not all that different. They definitely seemed smart, just more primitive. The locals, especially around Columbus, know they're there. There used to be a road connecting the back of Benning with Columbus that ran right past the ranges. People saw them on that road sometimes, though few drove it often. If you drove down that road late at night, there was a good chance you would see one or have something thrown at your vehicle. I know a family who had one run up next to their speeding van and smack the side of it. Why they did that? Maybe they just like the thrill, like every dumb human who does something dangerous. We never had any real problems with them, and they didn't have problems with us, but they did like to play pranks. The Visitor. On my last deployment overseas, I shot and killed an old woman. People say it was an accident, but I've never bought that excuse. We were ambushed in a crowded street. Gunmen opened fire and some civilians got caught in the crossfire. I panicked. I started shooting without really thinking about where the bullets were going. She ducked into a doorway behind us, to the left. I watched her crumple as several rounds hit her. 5.56 NATO standard ammo. My ammo. 2 of our own died that day, but it's her face I couldn't stop seeing. After that, they flew me to Ramstan, then back to the East Coast. Physically, I was fine, but they asked if I had suicidal thoughts. I didn't lie. I said yes. I went through therapy. Eventually, they separated me from the military. My wife and I moved to Virginia to be near a VA hospital so I could get mental health treatment. I worked security jobs just to keep us afloat, mostly night shifts. That's when things started getting strange. I'd go to bed with the bedroom door closed and wake up to find it wide open again. Closet doors, dresser drawers, all open. Our German Shepherd, huge dog, over 100 pounds, started pissing himself and hiding under furniture, but only when my wife wasn't around. She started accusing me of abusing the dog. I was furious. I loved that dog. I couldn't believe she thought I'd do that. Looking back, I think whatever was messing with us wanted to stir trouble. The thing, I don't know if it was a demon, a ghost, or something else. It targeted the dog because it knew my wife loved him. It wanted to drive a wedge between us, to make us fight. It fed off our fear and anger. The more scared or angry we got, the stronger it got. And the stronger it got, the more ways it could make itself known. If I owe anyone anything, it's my wife for sticking with me through all that darkness. I can't believe she stayed with me through everything. But she saved my life twice. Once when I came back from Iraq, and once more during this nightmare at home. I'm convinced that thing wanted me dead. That was its purpose. The first time it got physical, I woke to Buck, our German Shepherd, growling. He usually slept at the foot of the bed or on my wife's side. That night, she was still asleep, but Buck was fixated on something in the doorway. We always kept the bedroom door closed, but that night it was wide open again. There was nothing visible to me, but Buck tracked something moving into the room and toward the bed. He backed off, moving by my wife, growling and baring his teeth at whatever was at the foot of the bed. I wanted to get up, but I was terrified that if I moved, the thing might attack her, so I stayed frozen. Then I felt ice wrap around my ankle. Suddenly something yanked me hard, pulling me off the bed. Buck barked furiously and lunged at empty air. That woke my wife. She found me half on the bed, tangled in the sheets, unable to stand. The yank had dislocated my knee. She rushed me to the hospital. The bruising on my ankle was deep purple, and the x-rays showed violent trauma. The doctor asked if I had been in a car accident. I told them the same story I told the nurse. I fell out of bed in my sleep. The doctor didn't press. But that moment changed everything. When the thing hurt me, it also helped because my wife finally believed me. I told her everything: doors opening, footsteps in empty rooms, strange smells, cold spots that moved around the house. I told her how the thing tried to break us apart, to isolate me. But hurting me only brought us closer. Now she believed. Now we fought together. I've never been religious, despite growing up Christian. I prayed in Iraq, who didn't? But I never really believed. I doubted God was listening. My wife, though, had been a lifelong believer. The first thing she did was turn to the church. The local church didn't know what to do, didn't even seem to believe her. But she didn't stop. She kept searching, moving on to churches in other towns, until finally someone said they could help. That's when the thing got desperate. It knew its time was running out, and it went into overdrive. One night we were eating dinner, watching TV, when suddenly the remote floated in the air in front of us. It hovered for a moment, then shot straight at me like it was about to strike. My wife yelled, "Jesus!" like a cry for help, and the remote stopped mid-air. It jerked toward me again, and she called Jesus' name again. The remote halted once more. She began praying out loud. Suddenly, a deafening scream ripped through the room. The remote flew between our heads and smashed on the wall behind us. The thing was furious, angry at her prayers. It had tried to hit one of us, but something stopped it. Later, it attacked me again. My wife gave me a crucifix to wear every day. One night, I woke choking, gasping for air, while Buck barked wildly. My vision blurred, and I felt myself slipping away. Through the haze, I heard my wife screaming at Buck and praying. It was distant, like she was far down a long hallway. That's when the thing stopped choking me. I had a bloody red line across the front of my neck, where the chain of the crucifix had dug into my flesh. My wife told me that when Buck woke her up barking that night, she saw something pulling on the crucifix, tugging it down toward the floor on my side of the bed. She said it looked like something was lying there trying to choke me out by dragging that chain as hard as it could. But when she started praying, it just let go. After that, I wasn't afraid for myself anymore. I was terrified for my wife and Buck. I knew the thing could change its mind and go after them instead. And, unfortunately, I was right. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but a neighbor saw something and told me what he witnessed. We had a small front yard with a wooden picket fence. Buck was big but friendly. He loved meeting the neighbor kids at the fence so they could pet him and scratch his ears. We weren't really worried about him getting loose, but we always kept the gate locked just in case. Still, Buck could have jumped that fence anytime he wanted to if he really tried. My neighbor was mowing his lawn when Buck suddenly went crazy, growling and snapping at something invisible in the yard. He followed it all the way to the fence, then suddenly jumped over like he was chasing something only he could see. The dog ran straight into the street, right into the path of a speeding F-150. Anyone who's ever driven one knows that big hood blocks the driver's view of anything close. The driver never saw Buck, never braked. I know the thing lured him out there. I know it was angry at Buck for waking my wife and saving my life. We were devastated by Buck's death, but if the thing hoped to break us with grief, it failed. It only made us more determined to get rid of it. We were barely scraping by. Moving wasn't an option. And I knew this wasn't random. It was personal. Luckily, it wasn't long after that we finally found some real help. We couldn't get any church near us to take us seriously, but my wife was directed to a church outside Lurie, Virginia. It was a tiny rural church with a mostly black congregation. When we showed up for Sunday worship, we definitely turned some heads, not because of our skin color, but because visitors were rare. After the service, we spoke to the preacher. He listened closely, taking notes, then told me he'd be happy to help. When he smiled at me, it was like the clouds parted for the first time in nearly 2 years. I can't explain it, like God was telling me, this is going to be all right. It took 3 visits for the thing to finally leave me alone. I don't want to get into what happened during those visits. It got really bad, really personal, and it wasn't easy for anyone involved. That thing fought like hell and attacked everyone, trying everything it could. But that church came to our house and they filled it with light. I mean the whole church. They rolled up in 2 vans, a big group of them. The preacher said this wasn't a one-man job. That's not how God's kingdom works. Everyone was there to fill our home with love and to drive that thing out. It was like the color came back to our lives after it was gone. I can't say enough how grateful my wife and I are to everyone who helped. The preacher told us we were dealing with a demon, one that could only be driven out by love. I don't know if it was a demon. Sometimes I think, and I thought then, maybe it was the spirit of that old woman